Well, what is up, movement? It is great to see you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam, and we are in week 5 of our series called Big Picture. And today we're going to be looking at the question, what do you do when you see the person face to face that offended you? What do you do when you come face to face? Maybe you're scrolling on Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or TikTok and you see the person that offended you. You see the person that called you out and said your hair was nasty, or your shoes were too old, or your grades were in the tank. Like, what do you do when that person walks into your 4th of July celebration, your Thanksgiving celebration, and you're like, oh, I wasn't ready to see you today. We have something between us and it's not good. How do we respond when we see the person that upset us, that hurt us, that offended us? Well, we're going to look at the life of Joseph today, and he provides a great roadmap for us on how to deal with people that have offended us or that have hurt us. And the big idea today, the takeaway is going to be this. It's going to be when you can't see the bigger picture, when you can't see the bigger picture, we're going to choose to forgive. Now, notice I didn't say that we would feel like forgiving. I didn't say when we can't see the bigger picture, we're going to feel like forgiving, because lots of times that's the last thing that we feel like after someone actually hurt us. But we're going to choose to forgive when we can't see the bigger picture. I realize that sometimes forgiveness doesn't come easy for some of us. It's not easy to say, I forgive you and mean it. And here's what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is that when we forgive someone, that we have to open ourselves back up. That we have to open ourselves back up to any potential abuse or any potential hurt that might happen in the future. Sometimes you forgive the person, but the trust takes a while, or you are never able to hang out the way you used to. That's okay. But we're going to talk about how to forgive when you can't see the bigger picture. Like I said before, sometimes forgiveness is hard. Me and my brother used to get into it all the time. How many of y'all have siblings that you fight with on occasion? Exactly. And here's the thing. My brother and I would fight all the time, but on occasion, we would go to war. Right? On occasion, there would be like a big fight. And whenever that would happen, my dad would remind us of a story that happened in his family. So it happened to our relatives, like my relatives. This is a story that happened to them. He would remind us that there were these 2 brothers that grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. When I say small town, I'm talking like a couple hundred people at the very, very most. So these 2 brothers grew up together. They went to the same school. They did everything together. They were on the same sports teams. They went to the same church. They went to the same outings and events. They knew all of the same people. Their best friends were each other's best friends. And eventually these 2 brothers grew up, bought their own farms. So they were farmers by occupation. They bought their own farms, and they had 1 combine, right? You see where this is going? 2 brothers, 2 farms, 1 combine. For those of you who don't know what a combine is, which I'm guessing is all of us, it is essentially used to harvest the crops. So farmers grow crops in the fields, and then it's like a big, gigantic lawnmower that harvests those crops. And the brothers decided, hey, let's be thrifty and just buy 1 and share it. Well, what happened is that one of the brothers said, you know what? I'm not going to talk to my other brother. I'm just going to go take it and harvest my crops before he gets the chance. So he's kind of sneaky. Not a good thing to do. And because he did that, the other brother did not get the chance to harvest his crops, so they all died, which meant that his family wasn't able to have financial stability in that time. All of the work that he did that entire year went to waste, and that caused a lot of tension between the 2 brothers. Big fight broke out, and here's what didn't happen. There was never reconciliation. There was never forgiveness. For the rest of their life, those 2 brothers that used to be so close never spoke again. And this would always rock my world when my dad would retell this story, because it hit a little extra close to home, because it was our relatives. It wasn't in our immediate family, but it happened generations before. So to think that 2 brothers that used to be close now don't celebrate together. They don't talk to each other. When one would walk into the room, the other would leave. When one would come into church, the other would leave. When one would come into the store, the other would leave. When they would walk down the street and they would about run into each other, the other one would cross to the other side of the street. This made things awkward for the family, right? Nobody was getting together for birthdays. Nobody was getting together for Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything like that. What unforgiveness does is it literally robs us. It robs God of the opportunity for a crisis to become a celebration. Because no doubt, there was a crisis, there was an offense, wrong was done. But if they would have zoomed out and understood that God wants to turn that crisis into a celebration, there would have been the chance for forgiveness and restoration. Now, that's a sad story, but today what we get to walk through is the life of Joseph. And we've seen a lot of hurt in Joseph's life. We've seen a lot of hurt in his family and his family line. But today, finally, we get to see some good news in the life of Joseph. I'm excited to see it, and I'm excited to hear about it. We know from last week, Jacob Brown was here, he was giving us a great message, that Joseph now emerges from prison after he interpreted Potiphar's dream. So he interprets the dreams, he's out, he says, here's what's gonna happen, Egypt. You're gonna go through 7 great years where there's tons of food, and then you're gonna go through 7 bad years where there's like no food. So we better save up some food. So because of his plan that he puts into place, Joseph now is second in command. So he gets to call the shots for the whole nation. And because of that, he's got a big, old bank account. I'm talking a huge bank account, like ridiculous. He can now go anywhere and get anything that he ever wanted in his whole entire life. Like, y'all remember those stimulus checks that were floating around, right? Hopefully you got some of that. But it would have been like if the government would have slid a check to you and went, you fill out whatever amount is right for you. Whatever amount that you feel is right, you just go ahead and write that in and we'll cash it for you and get it to you right away. How many of y'all would have went out and bought like a brand new iPhone, brand new Xbox, PS4, maybe some nice shoes, maybe you go to the store and buy a ton of makeup. Like, I don't know what you would have bought, but go ahead, put in the comments right now what you would have purchased if you had unlimited access to as much money as you had. That's basically what Joseph was working with. He had a big, old bank account. And because of that, he understood the necessity of saving crops and grain for his nation. So while everyone else around in the surrounding countries and nations were getting pretty hungry, his family, his nation was just fine. As a matter of fact, they had enough to give away. They had enough to sell to other nations. So what happened is his brothers come from their home into Egypt. They didn't know that he was still alive, but they actually come face to face with Joseph and say, hey, would we be able to buy some food from you? Because we're getting hungry. We're getting hungry. How many of y'all, it's like still morning, you've had breakfast, but you're thinking about lunch already? Me too. I'm getting hungry as well. But here's the thing. He comes face to face with his brothers. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to react. The first thing he did was get some space. The first thing he did was get some space. The next thing he did was talk to God about it. He cried, he prayed, he got space, he got some perspective on it. And then we're going to pick up right here when things start to get really, really good. He comes face to face again with his brothers. A whole bunch of stuff happens in between there. I'd encourage y'all to go back and check it out. But we're going to look at Genesis chapter 45, 1 through 5. Let's read it together right now. He says, I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? It's almost as if he said, hey, I'm Joseph, in order to get to the point where he could say, is my father still okay? It's been 20 years since he's seen his father. I'd imagine that there's a tremendous amount of heartbreak there and a tremendous amount of, I just hope he's okay. I just hope he's okay. So he said, is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. I'd imagine you'd be speechless. They said they were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Joseph said, please come closer. So they came closer, which is an act of trust right there. And he said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But here's the wild part. Here's what Joseph says. He says, don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your life. That's some ridiculous perspective. That's some ridiculous ability to zoom out and understand, hey, even though you meant to mess my life up, even though you meant to end me, even though you meant to hurt me, I understand that God worked it all out for good. And I don't think that would have been possible for him to have that perspective had he not gotten away, had he not prayed and gained some perspective. And what he went on to say to his brothers was equally as ridiculous. He went on to say, here's a bunch of gifts. Go take them back to Dad. Bring all of your families with us, and we're all going to live together in peace, in harmony, with as much food as we can possibly eat. That's ridiculous, y'all. That's absolutely mind-blowing, the type of forgiveness that Joseph just demonstrated. So to answer the question, what do we do when we see the person that offended us? How do we react? Do we react out of the first thing that we say? Do we react out of the first thing that we feel? No. We're going to react exactly how Joseph reacted. That's my heart for us. That's God's heart for us, is that we would zoom out and give God the ability to turn a crisis into a celebration. You see, maybe you're emerging from quarantine with a whole new list of hurts. What mom said, what dad didn't say, my friend ignored me. Maybe you're emerging with a whole new list of hurts. Or maybe this message brings to mind some old hurts where you go, I remember what they said. I remember that they didn't say what I wanted them to say. I remember them not showing up for me. I remember them not being there when I needed them to be. And that really still hurts. And that's really still real. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you trust right away. I'm not saying that the hurt isn't real and that the pain isn't real. For sure it is. But what I would encourage us to do, and I think what Joseph would encourage us to do as well, is kind of take a page out of his book and say, be curious about the opportunity, about what it would look like if we zoomed out and gave God the opportunity to turn our crisis, because no one's trying to say it's not a crisis, what would it look like if God turned our crisis into a celebration? And maybe that means we take a step back and say, I can't talk about it right now. Give me a week, give me a day, give me a year. Maybe that means we get with one of our leaders and say, hey, how do I process this? But my hope is that in Movement, that we would become a people where when a crisis strikes and we get hurt, we get offended, somebody sins against us and it's real and it's raw, that we wouldn't respond quickly out of our hurt, but that we would zoom out and give God the opportunity to create a celebration out of our crisis. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today in Groups Movement. We're going into Zoom small groups. So hopefully you've already downloaded the Zoom app. If not, now's your chance right now. Go download the Zoom app in a quick, fast hurry and get ready for your small group. We're going to DM you the codes. If you don't have them, reach out to us. We would love for you to be a part of our small groups today, because we need to talk, because there's been some hurt, there's been some offense, and we've got to process it. We do not want to end up squashing God's ability to create a celebration out of our crisis. So Movement, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about it in groups today. I'm so excited to see y'all there. I can't wait.